right, hello everyone. Welcome back to D-Pod. We're doing another peer episode today. And today we have Mike Chen. Hello, Mike.
Hello.
Nice.
Hey, DP.
Nice. How do you feel, man?
Feeling all right.
Feeling all right?
Feeling good.
A little nervous to be on air?
A little bit. But when you told me that no one listens to this,
yeah, no one listens.
I felt a lot better.
Yeah. No worries, dude. Nobody's going to listen to this. Just me.
Yes.
Nice.
Thank you.
So Mike's, one of my peers. We both went to school at UC Berkeley, and now he's serving in Minneapolis at the University of Minnesota church there. And you're doing youth ministry with your wife and 2 kids. So welcome to D-Pod. Maybe you can just start by telling us a little bit, more about yourself. Like, tell us about your family, what you're doing for work, things like that.
Yeah. So like you mentioned, married with 2 very crazy toddlers. There's a lot of stories about them, but 2.5 and 3.5. We live in St. Paul, Minnesota, right along the border. So right in the Twin Cities metro area. And we have been serving in our college ministry for the past 4 years. And now we just transitioned over to youth ministry. So originally from California, actually from 714. I know that's
714 area
current hometown.
Yes.
DP. So a little connection there.
Yeah. Nice. So, and what are you doing for a living now?
What do I do for a living? I'm a front end developer engineer. So I basically work on the Target website.
Nice.
I work on buttons, making sure those buttons work when you click add to cart.
Nice. Is it actually that? Is it actually the add to cart button that you're working on?
That's one part. Okay. There's other things.
Nice.
Right now we're revamping the product page. So when you click on, a t-shirt and it shows you all the size charts and, you worked in retail. You kind of familiar.
Yeah. Target, dude. Target, the fancy.
Target.
Yeah.
We have Levi's. We
actually, because you guys only used to hold Denizen. Then they used to make a separate brand just for Target. But then I think they actually just have Levi's now. It's just straight up.
Yeah. They're great. Yeah.
Nice. Maybe tell us about your 2 kids. So if you had to summarize what they're like what's maybe like a word to describe each of them? Like, how are they different? Lauren and Sydney, right?
Yeah, one's big and the other's small. The big one likes to eat and the small one likes to whine. Yeah.
That's funny.
I think the bigger one has better like social EQ, and she kind of knows how to if she's not really tired, she can kind of pick up on social cues. But the small one has like no sense of like normal. She'll just walk into middle of like a stage and start dancing.
That's funny. Nice. It's kind of crazy how like the personalities come out so early. Because how old are they?
2.5, 3.5. We had them back to back.
Oh yeah, 2.5, 3.5. Yeah, and it's crazy how early on you can tell that they have different personalities. So yeah,
super different.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you're in Minneapolis or St. Paul, Minneapolis, Twin Cities, and whenever it's kind of cold here or a little bit hot here, what I do is I look up the weather in St. Paul, and then I immediately feel better. So thank you for always encouraging me in that way. But I'm sure growing up, you didn't imagine that you'd be living in St. Paul. Could you tell us a little bit about like how you ended up in like your journey to Minneapolis? How did that happen?
Oh man, it's a long story.
Okay.
Like, yeah, you're right. I mean, like I never imagined I'd be here, but it's a long journey I grew up in church and didn't really understand any of that until I came to college and hit some lows in my life. And I found our church, became Christian my sophomore year, graduated, stuck around, worked in the Bay Area, served in college for a few years, and then served in youth ministry for 6 years after that. And then 2019, my students were the graduating seniors. So it was like a really good time to, try something new. And that same year, a lot of our Minnesota church staff, they moved to the East Coast to help out with youth ministries in the East Coast. So there's a big need for like kind of older people. I guess I was only like 29. I guess that counts as old for our church. So Winnie, my wife, and I, we decided, hey, let's go to Minnesota. Like there's a need there. Steve and Suzanne, they were our mentors at the time. They asked us if we want to go, so we thought, hey, why not? I think God's opening a door for us. So we moved summer 2019. I thought it was, I think everyone moves to Minnesota thinking it's going to be cold all year round, but like we came in, it felt like a jungle. It's like so hot and humid. But yeah, that's kind of how I ended up in Minnesota.
Yeah. So what was your initial impression of the city there? I guess besides like being hot and humid, which is true.
It was kind of charming, like SF is so dense and sprawling, Oakland too. And then moving to here, this metro area is like not as dense. I think people just leave the city after work and go home to their families. I think St. Paul is rated as one of the most like livable, family friendly cities in America. So I felt that it's kind of nice. Don't feel so hurried.
Yeah. We've been out there a few times to like visit, take our students there, and every time we've really enjoyed it. And it's like really beautiful. It's like on the like Mississippi River and things like that.
Yep.
I think people don't realize, like if you're from California, like this is something I didn't realize about the Midwest, but like every single city here has like a really beautiful river that runs through it. And it makes sense because I guess that's why they built the city there, because there's like a water source. So, yeah. So that's neat.
It's beautiful. Yeah, the river is really beautiful with the skyline.
So
I appreciate that.
What do you miss most about like California?
That's funny because I went back. What was it? Well, I went back right before my first kid was born, and it already felt very like hurried. So I didn't miss any of that. But if I were to miss one thing, it's the diversity of like good food.
Oh yeah.
Because when I moved here, like we're eating Chick-fil-A like almost every other week because that's like the best thing, I mean, and then when people visit, we go have nice breakfast. Or I guess when we celebrate like special occasions, we have nice breakfast because you haven't had real pancakes till you had a Minnesota pancake.
Minnesota pancakes are pretty good. I can attest to
that. Yeah. So I miss a lot of the diverse food options in California.
Yeah, that is one that I hear a lot actually. Yeah, it's just different. Like there's a lot more ethnic food options in California. So
yeah, I miss having dim sum. I miss having like Taiwanese food. Not that there was a lot in the Bay Area, but Taiwanese food, but there's a lot more in SoCal. So whenever I go to SoCal, I go to like 4C and get like the Fan Tuan.
Yeah.
Is that like rice burrito?
Right.
I miss that.
It's funny. And in terms of like differences between your experience in California and Minneapolis, what was the difference like in terms of like students? Like, cause you were doing youth ministry in California, and then you went over into college ministry initially at the U of M. I don't know. Were there any observations that you had about like the culture or how people were when you moved?
I think definitely church is a huge thing for people in the Midwest. Like whether you identify as Christian or not, like church is just part of your, part of growing up. So a lot of kids and they do the confirmation thing as a teenager, or they get baptized as infants. I guess if you're like growing up in the Catholic Church, which is a big population, Catholic, Lutheran out in Minnesota, at least. So I met a lot of these really well-churched kids, and they're really good boys, They're like, maybe not like in the South where they're like, yes, sir, no, ma'am, right? But they're very nice, and they won't say no outright. They'll tell you, I'll think about it, or yeah, that sounds good. Let me check my schedule. So I rarely received any like flat out, oh no, not interested. Yeah. So, but they're really nice compared to like Berkeley. Like I remember, college students could be kind of cold. So it's a little different out here.
Got it. Yeah. So So you did college ministry for a while there, and then now you're doing youth ministry. What kind of like, I guess, what are you guys doing in terms of youth ministry there? Like, what's the direction as you look at this coming year?
Oh, that's a good question. We're still trying to figure it out, and I think that's what a lot of the AYM groups across our church are still trying to figure out, because we wanna bless youth
Mm-hmm.
in our region. We also do youth group on Friday. So it's like, do we want to grow our group? Do we want to reach out to people and draw them into like our youth group, or like so youth is also kind of umbrella for like all youth, including like our own kids who grow up in our church, as well as like inner high churches. So some of our resources are devoted to visiting the inner high churches, and we just started to visit a Hmong church.
Mm.
I'm going to start putting on Sunday services for them in September. So there's that. There's this inner high. There's the AYM aspect where we're trying to bless youth. We're trying to put on camps, trying to do all sorts of things. So it's hard to put like one singular focus right now on it. And then there's the church, the kids who grow up in our church aspect. That's been something we got to figure out too. Because they need a reference group out here.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, luckily our group's been kind of going on for about a couple of years now, 2 years. And we have a group about like maybe 20 to 30 youth that come to our youth group every Friday. And that's been pretty good for our church kids to see other Christians their age every week.
Yeah. Yeah. So because when I think about youth, it's, because I guess in terms of college ministry, sometimes it's like more quote unquote more clear in a way, because we're trying to get on campus, and there's like on the one hand Christian students who need to be discipled and kind of mobilized for kingdom purposes, and then there's non-Christian college students who we need to love and preach the gospel to. So in some ways it's like, okay, well, that's the mission. But I guess what you're describing with youth is that there's a mix of different needs. It's like our youth that are the kids of our staff, right, who need a youth group, right? There's the need to try to maybe be evangelistic with youth students so that we can draw them and preach the gospel to them. But then there's this like element of like, well, we're also trying to bless churches that have youth. But then there's like a tricky dynamic there, I guess, because we don't want to take their youth from them, right? We want to like equip that youth group to, and the students in that youth group to like be evangelistic and reach their friends, right? And enable that ministry basically. And I guess there's right now you guys are just living in all those worlds together. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. We're just trying to figure it out, and hopefully, I think this is like year 3. I think since we started youth group, and I think things will start to form and become more clear. Hopefully this year. I have a sense of that right now, but still figuring it out.
Got it. Yeah. And maybe it just has to do with who God ends up bringing and what the needs are.
It's also very different because like Winnie and I, we're a lot older now than, not a lot, but like when I first started youth ministry back in California, I was 23. How old were we in 2013?
Yeah, I think that was 23, 24. Yeah, that's right.
Dang. Yeah. So I think back then I was just worried about just trying to love like a group of youth, that's my small group, and I'm just trying to disciple them and love them. But it's like a different role now that we're like older, because we got a group of staff that we got to help them grow and help them grow in their heart and vision for their lives, as well as like pouring into the youth too. So it's a lot different this time around.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So speaking of youth, maybe we can take it back to our youth days, and maybe not our youth days, your youth days. And we can talk about Mike as a kid growing up. Maybe just, could you like briefly talk about your spiritual background? Like, when you were growing up, like exposure to church, how'd you become Christian? Like that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I grew up in a Christian home. I have three older brothers. My mom and dad would take us to church like every week. We would do like nightly family worship where we sing some worship songs and read from scripture. So mom and dad, very godly people, went to church, had that whole experience growing up in a Chinese American church. My dad passed away, I think when I was like 5 years old from stomach cancer. So my mom raised us by herself. So I think I think having like two daughters is pretty hard, with my wife. But I mean, just think about what my mom had to go through raising like four boys. It's like boys too, by herself. So yeah. Like I appreciate her a lot more now. She just turned 70 this past year.
Wow.
So really thankful for my mom. But yeah, I mean, she did her best and had that whole youth group experience. Very thankful for it. I'm still the only one who regularly like attends, is part of church, Yeah, my childhood, I think I was probably the problem child in the youth group.
Yeah.
Because I think about that crazy like middle schooler. I think about like we got one of those, right? He's constantly just like strange questions and like can't sit still. I think that was probably me. So I really appreciate my youth mentors. But I mentioned like it was not something that I would fully internalize though till college, and I think it just hadn't experienced enough of life and my own personal sinfulness and just seeing that face to face. Not until college, but I think youth days that was like a very important thing for me, because I think that was what I landed on when I hit my rock bottom in college. I remembered like, yeah, Jesus still loves me, and like God's wrath, like just all those things across. So I wouldn't say I was like following Jesus as a youth, but it played an important role later on in my life.
Yeah. Because sometimes when we do ministry, it can feel like what's landing, or I'm not seeing any like fruit or something, right? But I guess what you're testifying to is that sometimes like that the gospel seed gets like planted in there, and then it's dormant for a long time until some situation allows that to awaken. Yeah, maybe you can talk a little bit more about that. Like how did that work out for you? Like you went to college, and what was your state of your relationship with God, and how did God maybe use your youth group experience to speak to you later on?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I came into college as like a spring admit, so I spent like a semester like out of high school, just kind of meandering.
Were you back home? Like you're still in?
I was at home. Yeah, I was at SCC Santiago Canyon College, just getting some credits while I was waiting to go to Berkeley. And I mean, it wasn't that bad. I mean, that I would say the summer retreat, it was my last youth retreat, that going into the fall, that was like very crucial for me to understand like I'm a sinner deserving of God's wrath, and that frightened me. And I think and I felt remorse for my sins at that retreat, but I think the response should have been like surrender, lordship, trying to find community. But I had a different response. It was like, I got to try harder. And like, because of what Jesus did for me, I gotta work harder to be a holier person. It's like, if I had just read the Bible, for myself and, cultivated that, daily devotion, routine, I think that would have saved me a lot of grief. But yeah, I mean, obviously that didn't work out because, I don't have the willpower. I'm just a sinner. Right. So going through my freshman year of college was like pretty bad. Didn't have the typical structures that I grew up with, like family, friends, the boundaries, wasn't as awesome as I thought. Right. So hit some lows at the end of freshman year of college. And then it wasn't until my sophomore year that it was funny, like, Win, right? He lived in the dorms with me my freshman year, and he had kept inviting me out to Bible study. And I remember one time he asked, hey, like, I'm going to do this thing called Course 101. You want to do Course 101 with me? It's a course on Christian foundation. I'm like, I know all that already. I grew up in church. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
So that's the flavor of who I was. I kind of just this proud, like know it all, but didn't really know much.
Mm.
I mean, I didn't understand grace. Like that's a big red flag, right? So, but yeah, after that freshman year, I just felt like such a low, but I got some encouragement from like a Christian brother at, I was helping out at that same retreat, at the youth retreat. I'm not a student anymore, but I could still help out. So I was just helping out in the background. And one of the older bros encouraged me, hey, like, you can't rely on these like spiritual high moments, that's going to fade, but you got to feed yourself with spiritual milk. And that resonated with me, spoke to me. And then I started coming to our, at that time, Grace Point, Sunday service and Friday Bible studies very regularly. And man, it was like hearing, it just sounded so, like I've heard this before, but it just sounded like so new. Like it was
right.
It was speaking to me personally every time. And I think one highlight was, Robert Kim. We went to the same high school together. And if you knew Robert Kim in high school, like, and then if you knew him then, and then I attended the baptism service, right? It was his baptism. He gave his testimony.
Yeah.
So if, you're at that baptism service and you're like, this is not the same man.
Yeah, who is this guy?
Who is this, right? And it had such a impact. It had a huge impact on me. And I think that's when Win got baptized too. And just seeing God working in that way, I wanted that, and come winter retreat time, I go home and I'm kind of feeling down. I hit some lows again, sophomore, fall semester. But then I remember one of my mentors sending me like a Christmas card and an invitation to winter retreat because I hadn't signed up yet. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go, but I decided, hey, like I want to go to this retreat. So we come back from our winter breaks and then we go to Mount Hermon, right? Yeah, it was Mount Hermon.
Mm-hmm.
And that was an amazing retreat. I think I just had that space to reflect and realize it was a demoniac. It was a Garrison demoniac, that message I remember. And I was that guy with the legion inside of me. And I had to just confess that. And I felt so sad for the townspeople who were so focused on like losing their pigs and they couldn't even see this guy and they shoo Jesus away. And I'm like, I don't want to be those people. Right. So I just realized Jesus is not the Lord of my life right now. And I want him to be Lord of my life. And that's when I made it very clear, like, Jesus, I want to follow you as Lord. So I made my lordship decision. And then, I mean, it's been a long journey since then. I mean, I think the first big step was deciding to live with like our friends at Dwight Apartments, that nasty apartment next to People's Park. Yes. I constantly smelled a lot of bad stuff. Yeah, but that was so crucial. The first step to, my sanctification and like actually surrendering. What does that look like? It's like being embedded with other Christians and being on mission together, trying to love each other as well, build up the church. And that was a very important step for me.
Yeah. I was curious about, cause you made that decision in that sophomore winter retreat to follow Jesus. Was that hard? Like, was it hard for you to make that decision? Like considering you grew up going to church all your life, but then like, I guess you realized, man, I'm not actually following Jesus. I'm like, I haven't given him lordship. Like how did you, do you remember how you processed that in the moment? Or was that kind of like, well, I should just do this? And like, I don't know, like how are you feeling as you made that decision?
I think it was more the latter. Like I knew I needed to make that decision. And then I wrestled with what that meant later on. It's like, oh, maybe I wasn't Christian before.
I see. Yeah.
So I had like, different conversations.
Right.
Like some of the older people and help me process like what I just decided to do.
Because it doesn't invalidate like what God was doing in your life early on. Right. It's just that, you needed all of that in some ways. And then there was that point at which you were like, okay, well, I'm not following him and I want to do that now. And that seems to be like what happened at that retreat.
yeah, I think it just wasn't clear, and I just wanted to make it clear. And like J.D. Greer and that, like, stop asking Jesus into your heart. It's like, it doesn't matter whether you were sitting in the chair before or you weren't. Like, what's important is you're sitting in the chair right now. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And then can I ask about, because you were saying that first big step sanctification had to do with like living with fellow brothers. So for people who don't know, like Dwight Apartments is literally just this like small apartment complex a few blocks off of campus that a lot of our church friends used to live in. So how did that, can you just tell me about that reasoning? Like, how did that follow from making a decision to follow Jesus to like, okay, well, hey, like, I guess I should move in here. Like, because I don't think that's immediately obvious for everyone. Like, so explain maybe your context a little bit.
No, yeah, that's a good question, because I had been living in the dorms as a sophomore. It's just guaranteed housing because I wanted to stay. They had this mentorship program because I come in as like an older brother, and then I thought, hey, maybe I'll sign up again for next year. So I'd be living in this context where, like, I'm this guy who just made like a decision to follow Jesus, but like my living situation is good. It could more or less just lead me down like the same path, right? I mean, all the things that happen in the dorms. So I just didn't want that. So I had been locked in actually for my junior year to live in the dorms. But I sent that email to like the director, and the housing director, and she was like totally fine with it. Like, hey, we totally understand if you want to, like, not live here next year, and you had another arrangement. So that was like a answered prayer, open door. And then I lived with Win and a few other guys. Yeah. They had 4 people, and somehow they were, able to squeeze in a 5th. So I think that was also another open door. So, but I knew just practically and realistically, if I'm going to follow Jesus, I can't do it by myself, especially if the environment's so against like how I'm supposed to be living as a Christian. Right. It can be way too hard and not realistic.
Yeah. Yeah, that's neat. It's neat that you decided to do that, because, like, I can imagine people saying, oh, it's too inconvenient, or, I already committed to this and I don't want to, like, tell this person, hey, I changed my mind or something like that. But I guess in that way you like took a decisive action and said like, hey, like, I think I need to be out of here. It almost seems like, so the emphasis is more on like, I need to not be in that situation, which is going to be really hard for me. And then I guess it turned out to be a huge blessing that you were with a bunch of Christian brothers who you could live out the Christian life with.
Yeah, huge blessing.
How do you think blessing. Like, so maybe just thinking about Dwight apartment days. So you were there for a year, right, at Dwight Apartments, and then senior year we lived in Dana House together.
Yeah.
So as you think about like living with Christian brothers, what's one way that was formative for you? I know there's like a bunch, but just whatever comes to mind, just one way.
I think just being a formed person, we all woke up together to, like, not like all of us, of course, but like just, we would have like DT groups. We had like set time and space. And, I didn't have that before, but just having that start to bake into a natural rhythm for me, like waking up, going to God's word in the morning, and like being able to have times where we can like share and be vulnerable and pray for each other, bear each other's burdens, like actually have a picture of what that actually looks like instead of just reading it in scripture. Like, here we are actually trying to do that, like bear one another's burden and fulfill the law of Christ, right? Galatians. Yeah, there's things like that. I mean, there's practical things like daily practical things like cooking for people. Yeah. Like learning to be learning to be a person, like forming myself to become like an adult, being able to pay rent, and like take the burden of like paying utilities, or like there's like little things like that I never really worried about, because either the resident hall took care of it or like my parents took care of it, right? So that was formative, definitely, in terms of like loving people, as well as like having community together and actually being a church together.
Yeah. Yeah. When I think about like Dana House and, when we lived there all together, yeah, I think one thing is that like I'm naturally, like for me personally, I'm such a like naturally individualistic person, and like I would totally just live life on my own, and I only like interact with people if they're useful to me, like, or if I really need to because of something we need to do together. And I think it was really important for me to like live with people and kind of have people, again, not that everyone at the in-house, like all 20 guys, were making demands on my time, but at least a few of them, right? Like as we get closer, like, people, insisting that we hang out, or, like more opportunities present itself for me to say no to my natural, like, individualistic tendencies, and for the more Christ-like loving tendencies to be formed within me. I think I would have had a fraction of the opportunities, basically, if I didn't live with church people who around me were insisting on that we try to strive for the kind of life that the Bible upholds. So yeah. So anyways, that's what came to mind for me. But yeah, so I was thinking, like, because in your notes about potentially things we could talk about, you mentioned gaming, actually, and so I don't actually know too much about this part of your life, for me personally, actually. So it'd be, I'd be curious to find out. But like, what role did gaming, I guess, play in your life? Like, could you maybe just give us just a snapshot of what that was like for you, I guess, growing up?
I mean, gaming was like a recreational thing, like, and I think I just probably picked it up from my brothers because they're all gamers. Like, we all played like Super Nintendo, we played Mario Brothers, we played like RPGs like Final Fantasy, and I think later on they played like online RPGs like Warcraft and things like that. So it was always just something recreational, fun to do. Yeah, we did. That's kind of like I think a common experience of like Asian American kids. You grow up with kind of protective mothers, and probably that was more so with my mother, given like my father passed away. So just probably felt a little bit more overprotective about like what sports we, played, like no football, no basketball, none of that physical contact.
Yeah.
Want to keep us safe,
Not
stay home,
outside, yes.
study, get straight A's, just focus on your studies.
Then all of that gets
we're not
redirected
studying.
towards the video games, I guess.
Yeah, right. So then we have these like need to outlet because the male like we need to get that out of us, right? So where do we get that? It's from video games, right? So a lot of that need for like accomplishment and like working together as a team. I think that's why, things like those like massively MMORPG, right? That appealed to us because we can beat dungeons together with like random strangers online, but you feel like you accomplished something.
Right.
And we got really good at alt tabbing, like, mom comes in. Yeah. But yeah, it went from recreation, I think in teen years became like that, like an escape, a coping mechanism. I mean, I say that now in retrospect as someone who hasn't played in a while, right? But I think in my teen years, I think it definitely was like to cope with stress, like not think about the like insecurities or dramas from like real life. But I mean, it was fun. I mean, of course, games are made to be fun and addicting.
They're designed to be super fun. Yeah. So then, you mentioned that you don't play anymore. So like, like, I guess, could you tell us about that? Like, so you stopped at some point. What went into that decision, I guess, if that was a decision?
I think I was gaming all the way up to, I made my decision, I think.
Oh, okay. Like, and then, when you mean like your decision to become Christian?
Yeah. And then I think I slowly started to, I don't think I go. I don't remember if I went cold turkey or whatnot, but I just remember weaning off. I just knew, like, if Jesus is going to be Lord of my time, like, I don't know if like this is the best. I mean, okay, sorry, I might be over spiritualizing because the other part of it is I was CS major. I was intended CS major, and I was taking all these CS classes, and I had a GPA of like 2.7, I think.
Okay.
I was like, okay, I better
You need to
quit
study.
because yeah, I need to study, and I had to retake CS 61A.
Yeah.
So
No, but
kind of sucked to have to take that class.
We laugh about that, but I think the real life consequences of people's, like, I guess, addictions, we could call it all the way to an addiction, or even just like some unhealthy habits, unhealthy routines that they have with regards to video games. I mean, that's going to have real life consequences, right? Like sometimes it looks like someone actually failing out of school, and we've known people, that's happened to, right? But sometimes it's not just school, right? Like all areas of your life can be impacted, right? Like, that's time that you could be developing other things. Like you could be developing relationships, skills, like things that, like being involved in things that's going to build your character so that you can kind of handle the demands of life as it comes to you. So yeah, I don't know. Like I feel like there is something there. It's really interesting because in a recent interview that I did with, Percy and Elaine was talking about how, like, because she used to play a lot of video games and she stopped when she became a Christian too. And so, like, what could you maybe talk a little bit more about that? Like, yeah, because I know you mentioned like, okay, becoming Christian, but then there was the school aspect of it. But like, I mean, we talk about video games occasionally here on Dpod, but like, it's not like video games itself is sinful, right? Like it's really not. Like it's really like an entertainment thing, I guess. But then a lot of people I know have made that decision to stop, especially people who are like really heavily invested in it. So yeah, just speak to that a little bit. I think it might be helpful for people to just hear your reasoning.
No, yeah, you're absolutely right, David. I mean, games is not sinful, and it's not written in scripture, right? Thou shalt not video game. But I just think, if you just read in New Testament and you read Ephesians, like making the best use of our time because the days are evil, and just thinking about Jesus as Lord over my whole life and my time, and am I advancing God's kingdom, or is this helping me grow to become more Christ-like, or is this dulling my brain? And I think for me, at least, it's the latter, right? It's dulling my brain. Like I'm not connected with reality. It's not sinful, but I mean, because like if I get sucked into this game, like I'm not exercising watchful care over my brother, for example, So I think there are a lot of consequences that lead to sin, right? In that sense, like by filling my time up with, I mean, be it gaming or like media consumption. I mean, that being said, like, we played, what was that like mafia game we played during COVID?
Oh, the
Among Us. Yeah, like we played Among Us.
Yeah.
I mean, like when I visit family, like my brother will be like, "Hey, you want to try out this VR thing?" Oh, what am I gonna say? Like, like you sinner, right? Like, no, yeah. It's like, okay, let me check this out. Yeah. Okay, this is like kind of entertaining, right. But like, I don't want to spend like my whole life on this,
For sure. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, because I know like a lot of people, like I guess at our network, and for me personally too. I mean, I never was like super. I played video games. I mean, recreationally, like growing up, but I was never like super into it. So it was not like a huge issue for me to like. I think it just sort of phased out because I got busy with other things that I found more enjoyable. So that's how it happened for me. But I know a lot of people at our church, especially like the older ones, have like decided similar things like that. Because so I think that generally when you look at like our post-grad population or like our people who are like our staff team, like not a lot of people are like spending a lot of time on video games, right? But I think the discussion does come up that like I don't know, when I walk around at the U-Chicago campus, like on a Friday night, like there's like nobody outside. Like people don't come out, and then it's like I see so many lights on in the dorms, and I just know that a good chunk of those people up there they're either watching Netflix or they're playing video games, right? And this has continually haunted me, which is how do we like reach people with the gospel who are spending pretty much all of their discretionary time like, and this, I guess this is not just about video games. This is like just in the virtual world, right? Like just online, like that's pretty much where they get all of their social like interactions from. Like, I just feel like that's increasingly the case. And so I think it begs the question, like, so what do we do about that as people who consider ourselves ministers of the gospel, right? That's big part of our identity. So I don't know if you have thoughts on that. And, especially since you do youth ministry, and, a lot of youth are playing video games a lot, right? So like, how do you like think about that? Like, it seems like there's no simplistic answer, like to just jump in and just, therefore immerse ourselves into the, constant virtual reality and that world, like doesn't seem to be the answer. And to like reject it outright and be like, oh, we're just never touching that. Like that just seems to be like unrealistic and like a little bit like why such a strong view. So I don't know how you've balanced that.
No, yeah, I agree. It's tough. It's a tough subject to think about because, yeah, like so many guys, like, I mean, everyone plays video games now in some point, right? Like phone so like, we can't be Amish about this, but at the same time, like we don't really want to be in it to the point where like we're getting influenced either. So I don't know. One thing that came to mind is like, I don't know about college, but at least in youth, while they still have like structures in their life, like I got to go to school in person, or like I have to go to this summer camp where I'm going to see people face to face, I think that's an opportunity for us to offer like an appealing picture of like face-to-face relationships. And what I mean by that is like, we had a camp recently, like a STEM camp for middle schoolers. And like, at first they all just kind of seemed like zombies, but by the second day, they're a little brighter. And by the third day, like after they had like a water balloon fight, everyone is just wet and like, they're having a good time, and everyone just feels warm at the end of the camp. And like, our content wasn't even that great. Like, I think, the summer camps that the university offers are probably like more robust, but in terms of what these kids experienced, in terms of like our community and, having these fun Christian adults, I think that's a huge win, in terms of, that whole thing, like just while they're still young and able to have these like forced in some ways, because the parents sign up for camp, like have those face-to-face interactions, not be hateful, but like something life-giving. I think that would go a long way.
Yeah, that's interesting because, maybe for a lot of people, they don't even know what they're missing out on. Because I think some of us who've, like a lot of us who've experienced the blessing of in-person, close-knit community where you can be real with people, like there's nothing that replaces that, right? And, I mean, so, not to poo-poo this, but like, just I think the way of relating has changed because, now these people start to build their relationships online a lot more. And I think that's, that's fine. I mean, it is what it is. So I'm not trying to like say, oh, that's like a bad or something. Right. But I think what maybe people don't have as much of an experience with is like the genuine experience of in-person relationships that like really encourage you and form you and build you up as a person. And when you get that experience, you're like, oh man, like I really enjoyed that. Like that was really good. Right. And part of our role, whether it's youth ministry or college ministry, is to facilitate those kinds of experiences. But in order to bring people kind of close enough to be able to experience that, it involves a little bit of, like engaging with the online spaces, right? So that we can at least meet these people. And I think that's the thing that's continually haunting me, which is how do I even like interface with someone who doesn't really who doesn't hang out outside, right? I mean, the guys who are going to play sports and volleyball and things like that, we'll obviously meet them because they're always outside. But it's really this like large percent of the population, which like at least at Chicago, it seems like it's a large percent of the population, which like maybe doesn't engage outside activities. So I
think we're going to see that more and more.
Yeah, for sure. So maybe you can, this is related but not related, I guess. It has to do with the computer still, I guess. But let's talk about your career a little bit, because I know you had a really interesting like career trajectory, in the sense that, like, I remember in college, I would see you sometimes in like your room at Dana House or something, and you'd be working on like an animation project, right? Because you were like really into the arts and animation, and you actually interned at Dreamworks, right? If I remember correctly. And so that was like a huge like area of interest for you, and the direction that you wanted to go with your career. But then later on, you ended up switching to web development. But so can we talk about that? Like, what got you interested in like film animation to begin with? Tell us about that.
Oh man, so growing up, I loved Disney. I grew up watching all those like animated films.
What was your favorite?
Yeah, I think Lion King. Definitely Lion King. Nice. Yeah, that was one of my favorites. I remember being so excited getting the VHS. Totally dated myself there. But yeah, I watched that on repeat. It was like my favorite. But yeah, I always loved animation. Just even like the Studio Ghibli stuff. It was I was really big into like anime and manga too. So that kind of heavily influenced my style drawing. And as a youth, I just had that, dilemma that all youth have. What am I going to do with my life? Like go and be an engineer, don't be a doctor, like just kind of weighing all those things. And I thought, well, why not be an animator? This is kind of like something I like to do. I like to doodle in my math book, so I had affirmation from my peers too. Like, hey, it was pretty good. Like, hey, you ever thought about doing this for a living? Like, oh, maybe. So I did some courses in high school during the summer that kind of solidified that desire to be an animator. And then when I went to college, I think CalDay, UC Bug is this student-led I forgot what the student-led classes are called.
What, decals?
Decal. Yeah. So they had a showcase, and I was like blown away. Like, it had some really good stuff. And I was like, wow, this is all student done.
For people who don't know,
and I want to be a part of
Decal is a democratic education at Cal. And it's literally student run courses that you actually get credit for. And so that's like a thing at Berkeley. So that's what Mike's referring to.
Yeah. So I made it my priority to like sign up for that like every semester. So that's what a lot of my years at Cal looked like, just focusing on that decal, because what I wanted to do was get in the animation business and break into the film industry on top of like my CS courses, because I wanted to get into graphics. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do the art side or the computer science side.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. But I mean, obviously my GPA didn't reflect like computer science. So I was like, all right, by junior year, like I'm all in, I better be an artist. And that's like, being an artist is like the hardest thing, right? Because it's like, you either got it or you don't. I think a lot of times it's either you got it or you don't. And I'm pretty sure I didn't got it, but I got lucky like with the internship. So I was like, oh, wow, this door opened up. Right. So I interned at Dreamworks for a summer. I think you were at Visa that summer.
Yeah.
Too,
Yeah.
right?
That was right before senior year. Yeah.
Dang, look at us. Just one of these like big
Visa. That was also when the World Cup was happening, and half the time I think we were watching the World Cup at Visa.
Oh yeah, me too. In the cafeteria.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Oh, you too?
Yeah, oh man, but that summer, I don't know what your experience of interning was, but that's when I had my first like experience of like, wait, is this all there is? Oh man, I have to do this for the rest of my life, and I got so depressed.
Oh really?
Yeah. Maybe your experience
that was opposite for me. I was like enamored, like, because Dreamworks, like that studio was like, wow, right? It was like, had the big statues of the Kung Fu Panda and Shrek, and like you had the Academy Award that Shrek won, and like it's on display, and you walk by it every day, and it's just this nice campus in Glendale. I drove, so I live in Orange, city of Orange. So that summer I commuted like over an hour every day to get to Glendale and drive back. And yeah, I remember that was like so hard, but like it seemed like nothing, because I was just living a dream right there.
Yeah.
So that's actually, I mean, and then you're wondering like, oh, didn't you become Christian? So that was like the big conflict for me,
Mm.
it's like career and following Jesus, right? And that was a huge struggle for a while, actually, until even after graduation. Because yeah, after that summer, I got another internship, like I think in the fall and the spring, like just, or is it just the spring? I forgot now. It's been so long, but I was doing like full-time
Mm.
student and then like part-time internship during the school year too. So that ate into like my commitments to like, just trying to make the most of my senior
Yeah.
year. And that's why I had a lot of regrets,
Mm.
from senior year. I wish I did
Mm.
more, but just got so caught up in my portfolio and just trying to get the next internship or next big
Yeah.
opportunity. Cause that was my dream. I mean, I've been building up to this since high school,
Yeah.
so
Could I press in on that a
yeah.
little bit more? Because you were sort of alluding to the fact that, well, so you had become Christian, but this was sort of maybe like a battleground of sorts, like, internally, like with regards to your career and living out Christian life. But like, why was that an issue? Or like, why was it a conflict for you? Because I could imagine somebody like, and I've heard people, say this, which is like, hey, we actually need more Christians, like in big media companies that are so influential, and we need people who can bring a Christian perspective. And like, so in some ways, like, that would be really good if you could like go down that route and succeed there, right? Or like, and then again, there's nothing like inherently wrong with being an animator, right? So I see no immediate contradiction there at all, right? So there must have been something about how that was playing out for you that caused you to be wary or start to think of it as sort of almost like a battleground happening in your soul. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about that.
No, yeah. I mean, I don't think it really became like a huge like battle in my heart until post grad.
Mm.
I think senior year, it was just all like, well, I need a job and like, this is what I've chosen to do.
Right.
So like maybe it's God just opening doors for me. Like it was a little bit hard to discern. So like maybe I would give myself that like benefit of the doubt then. But I think definitely as we had our senior retreat. I mean, we went through Abraham and Lot, and I was very wary actually. I was wary, but it wasn't clear like, is this an idol though? Like, but I think post grad when I really wanted to serve in ministry, I felt this is something I want to be a part of because like it had such a huge role in my life. In college, like I want to be part of our ministry team. I want to serve in college ministry and like do the ministry that I received.
Mm.
I think it was until then, and the tension that my career on top of like serving started
Mm.
causing. That's when things started becoming more clear. Like what started giving way, and it was
Mm.
ministry. Like just being a little too okay with like, oh, I can't make it to this meeting, or like, oh yeah, I couldn't reach out to that guy because I was too busy with my animation
Mm.
homework, because I was doing some like extra like schooling for animation after graduation.
Mm.
So there's just a lot of things that gave way that started to paint a clearer picture of like, oh wait, like is Jesus Lord or is like
Mm.
my career the Lord,
Yeah.
So that was there were little yellow
Mm.
flags. And then I finally got my job at Dreamworks, like as like an like actual artist animator.
Mm.
And I'm like, wow, I made it.
Mm.
Like people would like, many artists would like give anything to be in my position. And like, here I am living this dream, right? No pun intended. And yeah, I just remember we started Make New that year. This is my second year out of college. And I'm basically just in this group. Like
Mm.
I'm not contributing anything.
Mm.
Like I'm just in this groove while I'm like giving all my attention and time to my job. And I think that's when I started having some tough conversations because I was so deluded.
Mm.
Right? I thought like, oh yeah, like I'm still part of ministry. I'm still serving on our ministry team in the college ministry. Like, I'm good with God, right? Like, but it took some conversations, right, to see myself clearly. Because when you're in it, you can't see yourself. You can't see the ketchup stain on your face. You need someone else to tell you, right? So that's when I started to see, oh, like, yeah, I think career is starting to become an idol in my life, or maybe it has been an idol in my life. I just never noticed. And that's when I started to really wrestle with that and reflect over myself. And yeah, like it was definitely something I needed to really struggle over. Yeah, that was the first part of the journey.
Yeah.
The second part of the journey is like, things don't last. So I got laid off like maybe 9 months into that job because like one of the movies didn't do good. So that was Rise of the Guardians. The one with the Easter Bunny and Santa, like, I don't know who thought that was a good idea, but that was a bad idea. But yeah, I got laid off and I was like very fearful, and I started applying to like game companies. Like my history with gaming is like my addictive personality and everything. And that was a huge source of struggle in my life. But I started applying and like, I thought, well, I'm just going to apply and see what I get, and I got some interviews and it's just interviews. And then, it became more than interviews. Like I made it to the like final round in one of them, and then I got that job. And I think I emailed all our friends like, hey guys, I got this offer. I think I'm going to take it. You guys are probably all surprised. Like, what the heck? Yeah, that's how deluded I was. I thought, oh yeah, like, everyone's going to celebrate with me, but it's like, what did you just do?
Yeah.
Like,
Interesting.
what? Like,
yeah, I think I remember. Yeah, I think I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just remember applying to that job, getting it, and thinking like, oh, I could still witness to my coworkers, right? Wouldn't God be pleased with that? And again, just having some tough conversations, like people kind of seeing me in the third person, like how fearful I was and how like kind of deluded I was. Wow, like that, just having that bubble popped and just seeing like, look, man, if you wanted to trust God, you would have said no and, turned down that offer. But yeah, I actually took that offer. So then I had to make this painful call, like later on, like after, it was Passion Week. I read through the reader on, Soren Kierkegaard, Followers, Not Admirers. I was like cut to the heart by that. I remember that was when Pastor Jonathan and Susanna moved to Austin. And then he was sharing about how he got that offer to, teach at Harvard, I think, but then he turned that down because, he was just so focused on just trying to love the people in Davis. That's when we started our Davis church. And then I turned back to my winter retreat journal, actually, because I was so cut to the heart from like the testimony, Passion Week. And like, I have this bin of journals, and I go back to like my winter retreat journal, and it said like, fulfill your oaths. That was that winter retreat, our sophomore year, right? Okay. I'm like, cut to the heart. So that next morning, I'm like, I can't take this job. So I call the animation director. I'm like, sorry, dude. Like, and he's like, you're going to regret this. I'm like, yeah, well, doesn't matter. Like I'm just going to make this decision. Like I'm ministering to college students and like youth, and like, how could I don't know if I could take this job. Like it's going to take up all my time too. Like I'm not going to be available for them. Well, that's how I turned that job down. And I was unemployed for 7 months, and I had a couple freelance gigs that were, provided actually, for my rent and everything that I needed. So I think God answered some prayers there. I got some like support from some of our friends, like unmarked envelope full of money and just support. And I just felt so undeserved, man. Like I just felt like I just kind of, betrayed God, betrayed my friends and like our church community. Cause like, I'm just trying to like save myself, doing the thing that everyone told Jesus to do on the cross, save yourself. And I just got met with a lot of grace and thankful, And then in September, I got a job like doing web development. I hadn't touched like a code in many years. but one of the older guys at our church, Jim, he was a manager and he had a junior role and interviewed, got through like 2-3 rounds, and I've been in development since, like, web development for many years now. Like probably like 10 years, I think.
Yeah. That was at the Gap, right? That was when we both worked in SF, I think. Yeah. So
yeah.
I remember we'd meet up sometimes. So yeah. Hey, thanks for sharing all that. Like, I think as I reflect on, man, some of the things that you're sharing, like even your decision not to take that job at, I guess, the gaming company, because, like, I guess for you like that would have been compromising on some commitments and values that, you wanted to hold, but just out of maybe a sense of desperation or just a sense of needing some financial security in your life, you had wanted to take it. But then, like, I guess, the Holy Spirit, like, really spoke to you in that moment, and maybe people's words guided you. And so, like, I don't know, like, in the end, if you took the job, like, I don't know, I don't think people would have, like, blamed you for it. I mean, it makes sense that you need to support yourself, like, and, you could have just done that for temporarily and then gotten a new job or something. But in some ways, because you did that kind of radical thing, like the step of faith that you took to actually say, you know what, I think I do need to trust God on this. And you actually, like, didn't take the offer. Then you got to experience, like, a lot of other things through that, right? Like, probably a sense of dependence. You got to experience generosity from people who helped you out during that time when you were needy, things like that. And I feel like that's how God works. Like you think that you're doing it for this one thing, but then, like, God shows you, like, many other things through that decision. So I've definitely experienced that. Yeah. So, man, when you were sharing earlier, I was thinking, I don't know why this story came to mind, but I was thinking about, you know how, like, Jesus challenges the Pharisees, and how, like, the Pharisees, they use Corban as an excuse to, like, there's this, thing called Corban where, they tell their father and mother, oh, sorry, like, if this money is set aside, I can't give it to you because it's dedicated to God. But then there was this, like, workaround so that they don't actually have to give it to God. Like, they can actually, like, renege on that later and just use it for themselves. And I guess Jesus's point there is that, like, the Pharisees feel self-righteous because they're, like, holding on to their own man-made traditions while ignoring, like, the essential calls of God. And earlier you were sharing that, because you were part of the ministry team, because you were serving, you felt like, well, I must be right with God. But then I really appreciate how, like, in the midst of that, you're realizing, wait, just because I'm, like, doing all the external stuff and attending all the right events, that doesn't actually mean I'm right with God, because, like, my heart could totally be, like, going after the wrong things. Like, my first love, or, like, my true love in my life right now could be, like, getting ahead in my career, or looking awesome in front of people, or, like, having a lot of money in my bank account. And if that becomes, like, the thing that drives us and gets us up in the morning, then biblically we call that an idol, right? And so then there's an issue, right? And I think that's maybe one way to summarize how you were, like, wrestling with the whole career question. Like, you knew in your heart that, like, this was more than just a job at a certain point, and this became your God, which is why you had to deal with it. And merely doing the external, like, the Corbin actions isn't sufficient. God wants more than that, I think. So yeah, appreciate you sharing that, dude. We're coming up on time, so maybe we can just end with this. I've been asking all of our peers the same question, which is, as you think back on the past 12 years, like, what do you, like, I guess 12 years since we graduated, right? Like, what are you thankful for? And then what's, like, a regret that you have, a regret that, like, there's something that we can learn from, because, well, Kato was telling me that this question makes us sound like we're, like, really old or something, but we're not. We're still young. It's sort of like a midpoint reflection, right? It's sort of like, oh, okay, it's been 12 years. As we look at the next, like, many more decades, hopefully, that the Lord gives us, like, how can we, like, lean into that? I guess that's the heart behind the question.
Man, I'm just grateful for, I mean, just the fact that, like, we're sitting here and we can recount God's goodness. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm just so thankful for that. Just thankful, like, we're still here serving, building up the church. Mm-hmm. And, like, it's not that, like, as we get older, like, we're more awesome, we've acquired more we do get more competent, I guess. But I'm sure you'll agree with this. Like, I just feel a sense of like greater inadequacy. Like, I'm still the way that I am, and I'm still struggling with this and that. And like, I still don't know where I'm supposed to be at like 3 p.m., or like 7 p.m., like after work, or like, who am I meeting today? Or like, I'm still struggling. But then it's like, I'm just been entrusted with good work still. And I'm so thankful for that. I'm thankful that like we got older people in our lives who believe in us, or not in us, but like that God can work in our lives, and they have vision for us, and, give us ministry to do, like, I just think back, like when I was a 20 something, like, oh yeah, like, yeah, God's lucky to, that's so tacky, right? But like inside you kind of feel that way. Right. And as you're older, it's like, oh man, what a privilege. Like, that I get to be here, and be part of salvation work, seeing people get saved, seeing youth, like their lives change, seeing our lives change, transform. Like, if you look back 12 years ago, like, I mean, some of us are still the same, right? But then we're totally different too. Right. It's kind of weird,
Yeah.
We're totally different people too. So very thankful for that. And then in terms of regrets, man, I just wish I spent less time thinking about myself, less time thinking about myself, and more time just noticing the people around us who, could have used a bit more love, or been, it's kind of, well, I know I just said like focus less on like myself, but at the same time, like be more attentive to my soul, I think. And spend the extra time praying, or like devouring God's word, which I feel like so hard now, with kids, and like all the practical realities that we got to tend to as like, dads and leading ministries, and which is not bad, but yeah, those are some things I regret, just not spending more time like tending to my soul.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that maybe that, it just gives us like a direction forward, because it's never too late to do those things, right? And to just continue to grow in like our depth of knowledge of God's word. And we're doing like a 40 days of prayer thing right now with our staff. And like yesterday, the prompt was about hunger, like hungering for righteousness. And it made me reflect on like, man, like, I think there was a time in my life where I like genuinely daily hungered for God's righteousness, but maybe in some ways I don't feel that as much anymore. Like, I'm just so busy, or like I just have the next thing to get to. And so I don't really like feel that, but that's like a crucial element in, pursuing Jesus. So appreciate those thoughts, man. All right. I think that's it. I think time's up. So let me just do the outro real quick, and then we'll say goodbye. All right. Thank you everyone for joining for D-Pod today. Hope you enjoyed the conversation with Mike, and we'll continue to produce episodes as fast as we can. All right. That's it. Bye-bye.